Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of a series that does not have a name yet. We got to think of something, Andy. But on this episode, we are going to focus on how to sell your collection. That's going to be the first 5 minutes or so. So, where the communities are, how to sort of bundle your collection. So, that's going to be the first bit. And then the second bit is going to be more into decks. So, if you've chosen the light side path of keeping your cards, not the dark side, you can learn a little bit more about kind of basic deck building and some dual decks, and we'll get into that a little bit. So first thing, Andy, do you kind of have any thoughts? I guess let me hand it over to you.
Yeah, I think to just quickly recap what episode 1 was like you found a box of cards at your parents' house or your garage or your attic or something, and you want to know what to do with it. And there's basically two things you can do. You can either sell the cards or you can keep them. And if you keep them, we encourage you to try it out, try the game out and play it again. You probably had them from when you were in like middle school or high school playing, in the mid 90s, late 90s. So, I think as far as, that's really mostly your two options. And we kind of went over what you're looking for and how to separate that stuff out. So, in this one, it's, if you decide you want to sell your cards, how do you go actually about doing that? What are you looking for? So, in the first episode, we said, kind of pull out your main characters and try to organize your cards just a little bit, because I think when somebody goes to buy it from you, they're going to want to know what's in your collection. I think
Absolutely reasonable thing, right? You can't ask for $1,000 for a mystery box. It just isn't going to work. So going about this, I think the first step, and this is also applies to folks that want to play or build decks, is to find a community. So Andy and I, how did I meet Andy? I met him on Facebook, and I swear it's not weird. So, we just, there's a really robust Facebook group. So if you just go to Facebook, I don't know how you're reaching this video, but Star Wars CCG, there's, I think, 3 groups actually, but there's a really, good main group that I'd recommend joining. There's also a subreddit on Reddit that I know a lot of people are on. There's a Discord. There's also the Players Committee runs forums, and I'll put links in.
I'll actually really quick share my screen here for a second. This will probably get a little weird for like 2 seconds while I share it. But one of the places that you can go is the PC's store, so the Players Committee. So after the game, like, quote unquote, died in 2001 when Lucasfilm and Decipher ended their relationship, the Players Committee was appointed to kind of be stewards of the game and maintain it, which they've done for the last 20 years or so to fantastic success. There's hundreds and hundreds of people who devote thousands and thousands of volunteer hours every year just to keep the game going. And if you go to their website, which is starwarsccg.org, up here at the top on the landing page are all their social media things, which will link you to all these different communities. So there's the Instagram community, Twitter, Facebook groups, Slack, Discord, Reddit, YouTube, Twitch. Like, I myself have been distancing away from Facebook more towards Discord. There's people who live and die by Reddit or by Twitter or by Instagram. And like, there's communities that are formed around all of these different social media platforms. So that's just a great way to go about it. And if you click on this, like if you wanted to go to their Twitter page, it'll take you directly to their Twitter feed. So I think that that's really a nice way to go about finding some of these communities.
Yeah, and I think there was also a forums right there that is a big. So that's the OG communities, the forum.
Yeah, forums are kind of outdated and archaic in 2022, but there's still a lot of resources and a lot of people that go in there and post. And there's a lot of sticky threads and all sorts of ways of going about learning more information about the game. So the forums are a wealth of knowledge that come out of 2003, basically.
So to get to the nuts and bolts of selling, though, so these are all places, in every one of these communities you can put up a post with some pictures and say, this is what I'm selling, this is what I'm asking for the price. I always think it's nice etiquette wise to put what what you would like financially for these cards, but that's kind of up to you. They're going to have their own rules. Another option is obviously going to be eBay, right? eBay is probably the most robust marketplace. Put stuff up, auctions, buy it now. I would always encourage folks to bundle it, right? So if you have valuable cards that are going to be sort of the anchor points of your collection, you want to make sure you're putting things into packages for sales that are, attractive, and you're not going to get stuck with just a giant pile of bad cards.
Sure.
So that's just a tip from me. Andy, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the two biggest selling platforms on the internet are eBay and Facebook Marketplace. The Facebook group is mostly older players, returning players. The people who are really into like the meta game of the game itself and like current decks and stuff, they're there, but they're mostly on other platforms like Slack and Discord and stuff. So a lot of stuff on Facebook is really geared towards people who are looking to buy and sell, people who are looking for collections, or people who collect, the cards themselves. So you're probably going to have a lot better chance of selling it on Facebook. It's easy to post up pictures. It's easy to, Facebook has its messenger system. So, plus you don't have to deal with like eBay fees, PayPal fees. Well, the person probably will buy it, but through goods and service, but like eBay and PayPal and stuff. So
that's just a quick little note. This might be very rudimentary for people, but the norm is using PayPal, right? So everybody usually uses PayPal. There's like goods and services, which provides protection to the buyer at a small cost. It's a 4% fee. So when people say, I've just had these conversations with people who don't have PayPal accounts or never used it. So just a note there, that's sort of the norm in the community is to use PayPal.
Sure. So I think that those are probably your two biggest avenues for selling your cards. eBay is going to have a lot more eyes and traffic. Facebook's going to have roughly higher returns and probably a lot more like of a community where you can ask questions or people can help guide you as far as pricing. I think that either one of those are going to be your kind of go-to for getting it sold. You post up your stuff, put a price, and put pictures of what you have. And if it's eBay, you could do probably an auction or buy it now. You'd have to kind of know some of your prices, but you could use eBay completed listings, which is what most people will go by for market value. If you do an auction, it's going to sell whatever, 7 days later it sells for. On Facebook, you can post up, with a price that you want. If, people think it's too high, they're not going to buy it. If it's too low, it's probably going to sell within like a minute. So,
definitely seen that happen.
Try to shoot for somewhere in the middle, and there's a good group of people that can guide you if it seems overpriced. So
the other thing, just to note is, like many things, this is a classic time versus money debate, right? Mm-hmm. The more time you put into this, the more money you're probably going to get back. So just keep that in mind, right? If you're really busy in 10 hours of sorting and putting things into like a Google spreadsheet, that's another common tool we use. Sounds nightmarish, then then don't do it. But I do think that the more time you put in, the more you can kind of think of a return. So I think that's kind of all the thoughts I have on it. I encourage people to get back in the game and play. That's the route that both Andy and I have taken. I think it's served us both well. So maybe it's a good, kind of pivot moment to kind of talk about decks.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, if you were just in it you found your cards and you want to sell them, that's how you go about selling them. If you're into to play it, then, we went over how to sort your cards in episode 1, and then how to kind of build your first deck, which was, build a 30 card deck, put in 5 or 6 locations, and fill in the rest with characters, blue cards and green cards, and you probably want to read through the beginner rule book several times, because it can be deceptively easy to play the game, where it's like you activate force and you put a character down in battle. But, the more you know the rules, the more complex it can become. So I'd suggest reading through the beginner rule book a few times. You can find that on the PC's website. They've got a rules section, and there's a rule book for beginners. There's the advanced rule book, which is like 250 pages long. That goes into like all sorts of nuance and detail, which you don't need on your first couple of games. And, really it's, you want to remember the basics are, you want to remember that you want to have 4 ability. So on a character card, they have an ability stat. If you have 4 ability, you can draw destiny, which is a randomized number at the top of the card. Kind of acts almost like a D8, so an 8-sided dice, because destinies go from 0 to 7. And that number will make your opponent lose things off of the table. And you're really just battling back and forth. I'd play a game like that probably 4 or 5, 6, 7 times, as much as you feel comfortable, until you get the hang of mechanics of activating force. So you're really just focused on like a 30 card deck. As you play a few more games, maybe go to 40 cards, add in some more characters. And if you've got a box that's a 5,000 count box, or even 1,000 count box of cards, you're only building a 30 card deck, out of 5,000 cards. So take a new stack of cards that you haven't looked at yet, and just sit there and like read the cards, and be like, okay, this card sounds interesting, let me try it, and just swap cards in and out and see what they do as you play. And then if you get to a point where you want to add some more cards, go up to 40 cards or 45 cards. Just make sure each side, a dark side deck and a light side deck, have the same amount of cards in them. And you can try to make them mirrors of each other so that they're kind of have good play back and forth. If you decide you want to put interrupts and effects, red cards in, put 5 in, choose 5 that you read them and be like, that sounds interesting. I don't know what it does, but it sounds interesting. Put it in your deck and see what happens.
Yeah.
And just kind of substitute like 5 cards in at a time, take 5 cards out, 5 cards in, see what the cards do. I mean, it's a lot of repetition, but when you think about it, like, if you were going to play, say, like a board game, like I tried to play the game Twilight Imperium from Fantasy Flight Games like a couple weeks ago. It took like 7 hours to set the game up and play the first turn. And my friend and I just stopped playing after that. Like, I'm not doing this. In 7 hours, you could probably play, 20 games of Star Wars CCG, and you're probably not going to sit there for 7 hours and play it. So, over the course of like a couple hours on a weekend, you could get, 5 or 6 games in and just kind of see how it goes. Move cards in, move cards out, and like experiment, read what a card does. And as you play more and more games, the cards will make a little bit more sense. So, this random red card might be pretty good, and you put it in and see what it does, and I think it can be a lot of trial and error. I think the next video that we do in this series will kind of go over some more like demo decks and dual decks and like kind of online resources that you can use for deck building. But at least for your first, several games, it's really just trying things out. It's like testing spaghetti, throwing it against the wall, see if it sticks.
I think that the key here is, trying things out and having a positive experience with it. Like, don't be too harsh on yourself, right? Like the red cards, if you read a red card and you're like, that doesn't make any sense to me, then just put it off the side.
Put it back in the box.
Yeah.
Same like I said with the rules. Like if you get to a point and you're just like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do here, just ignore it, move on. Just be like, okay, that doesn't happen, or it's your turn now. Like, and just write down what it was that you were doing. And you can take that to some online communities like we discussed. You can go to Discord or Twitter or Facebook and be like, hey, I'm a new player, or I'm a returning player. I haven't played in 20 years. And I had this question. I, built this deck, and, I had a Tuscan Raider at the Lars farm, and my opponent had this, and we didn't know what to do. What should happen? Nobody's going to get like mad and be like, oh, you have no idea what you're talking about, right? Like the communities that surround this game are very welcoming. And I think that's, something that the players committee has really kind of instilled, is that it's like a really passionate group of people who really love the game and they want to see it do well. So, new people coming in is always a great thing. So, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, Matt.
Just a couple. I think the Discord especially is a really great place of just asking random questions because of the way Discord's set up. It's just easy for instant responses. So that's just a resource to kind of think about. But I think this is going to segue really well into our next video, which I think is going to talk about dual decks. Which I think if you're thinking about this graduated step program, how to get into the game, once you've gone from 30 to 40 to 45 cards, I think really thematic dual decks, fighting over Hoth or Endor, that's the kind of stuff that can really, seal the deal, at least for me, as a player, where this was just cool, right? Like, having, Rebel Scouts and Endor. And so I think we're going to get into that a little bit in the next video. We're going to wrap this up. So, Andy, thank you once again for joining me. And we're looking forward to seeing everybody in episode 3.
All right. Have a good one.